Welcome to, this will be to like a workshop where we do an introduction to Angular. Yes, please. We got a question if this was a code along thing. Preferably not. We'd more request you to ask questions after, and we want to present how we think about it, how we deal, and how the techniques we use and how to deal with it and how to get started. And if you want to code along, be my guest. But it would be nice if we could just get through this. Okay, I know we got some small challenges over here. We had a little, how you say, demonstration ghost, we call it here in Norway. Demospøkelse. Maybe we're quit all the...
No, but we're good.
Yeah, we're good. Perfect. Is your mic on, Hazar? Do we get a yay in the crowd that his mic is on?
Hello, hello. Is it on? I can't hear it from up here. So, what are we going to do in this workshop? We are going to go through this checklist. Don't read it now, it's not important. But we are going to basically go through all the techniques that you need to build this small app. I spent like 2 or 3 hours yesterday setting this up. Basically, it's a to-do app. We're not going to build this to-do app. I'm just going to show you the techniques you need, because this is just half an hour or 40 minutes or something like that. So we could never build this in that amount of time. But you basically, it's a to-do app. You can add a to-do up here. So complete the KDS talk. Add it to the list. We can click it again to undo it. You can also click here to edit this, some random text, save it, and you could also delete stuff from the list. To build this app requires fairly simple techniques, so nothing major, nothing important or hard. To get up and running, we are going to install our Angular CLI, which I use in all my projects. I use this Angular CLI. It's really easy to start. It's really easy to install it. All the instructions are here. How to generate new components, how to serve the app. It's all in here. If you decide to use it after this course, test it, you can go to the wiki here, and it tells you, basically just start. In the wiki, it tells you all the commands that you have in the CLI, and you can go into, for example, nggenerate, and it will tell you what you can generate using the CLI. For example, a class, a component, directive, so on and so forth. And again, if you go into one of these, for example, component, it will tell you some flags you can give to when you generate the component. For example, if you don't want a test file because it will automatically generate a test file, or if you don't want a CSS file because it will automatically do that. Okay, so let's set up, say we have installed it now. I have it on my computer, so I am on the correct folder, and I will say ng new KDS demo. And then it will go through and install the app and install the required packages.
This gives you a starting structure with some, how you say, scaffolding code showing you the hello world that is classic in all computer languages. It gives you an example of a test file, because you have a built-in test framework in here. You can either choose several versions like Mucca or whatever you want to choose. You can drop it in and change it. So you have the spec file that contains the test, you have the TS file that contains the model code, you have the HTML, where you can render out the things from the model, and that, yeah, look at that, 43 seconds to make an app. You're good, Hazar.
Yes, and also they are working all the time to make this CLI smarter, more optimized, to shrink the build sizes of the apps. Okay, so let's open folder. We go into the KDS demo folder and open it here. Don't save. So let's see, I just, whoop, okay. So let's just really quickly go through the setup here. So on the root folder, we have a lot of config files. This is our package JSON, where you can see all the packages that are used and the versions. And then basically a lot of config files. We don't need to go into details there. Then we have the source is where the source folder is where our app lives. And inside here, inside the app, is where we will put all our components and where our first component is. One important file here is the main TS file, which tells our app which module is the entry module, which is what's like the
start of the app.
The start, what to bootstrap. It tells us it's going to be the app module, and the app module lives in the app folder, and this is the app module. All our components in our app will be declared here. All the modules we are going to use will be declared here, and all our services will also be declared here. If you manually create a component by right-clicking and adding a new file, etc., you would have to import it in the top under here in the declarations. But if we use the Angular CLI to create a component, it will automatically do this for us. And it will also automatically create the test file and the CSS file and the HTML file, so much more efficient to use the CLI for all this stuff. Let's try to serve this initiation app. And I know that the command for that is ngserve.
Just want to say that if there's any questions, feel free to ask.
Yeah, feel free to ask any questions along the way. So we are now serving the app. It's compiled. It's served. And we can go to localhost 4200. And we can see that, OK, this is the hello world or the welcome or the initiation app. Perfect. Let's see here. OK. So let's go into this app component here. This was the served. This is this one. This is the code for that. And if we just remove everything except from the welcome title, maybe. So now we have really simple HTML. And it says, welcome to, and then double curly brackets and title. Let me boost this a little bit. Whoa, 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 easy. Like that. And let's hide this a little bit. Can everybody see on the screen? Yeah. OK, perfect. So let's see what is this title. This is a way for us to show or render a variable inside our TS file. Before I continue, let me tell you, each file or each component will always have a HTML file and a TypeScript file. This one, the spec file, you can delete that and nothing will happen. And you can also delete the CSS file, nothing will happen. but the minimum required for a component is a HTML file and a TS file. Think about it as the backend file and a frontend file, if you want. And in our backend file, I will just call it backend, we have a variable called title, and that's what this is rendering. So if we look at our page, it says welcome to app. If we change welcome to just KDS here, save, and it updates welcome to KDS. So that's how we render a variable. If you want to create a new variable, for example, name, we can say welcome to then save, say welcome to KDS. So this Angular CLI, it built a lot of stuff for us. Like he said, from 0 to 80. Everything is ready, and you can just start building your components, hooking them up together, and start creating your app. I'm going to have to look at this step-by-step thing a lot to... okay. So, we are going to show you how to, for example, use two-way binding. And in able to use two-way binding, we're going to have to use something called a forms module. So that, therefore, we go into our app module, and we can just say we want to import forms module, and form module, maybe? And we can say here import module from, and I know where it lives, but you could also check up the docs to see where it lives. Lives in Angular forms. If we save this now, we can access everything inside the forms module in our app. So if I have an input here, and the way to do two-way binding is something called Ngmodel, and I can say that I want this. Basically what it's saying is that this input should read and also write to this variable. And which variable is that? It's our name variable. So if we go here, I can say, whoa.
Banana in a box. Banana, switch them.
You mean in here?
No, brackets and brackets first.
Yeah, square bracket first,
Aha.
and then
Banana in a box.
Banana in a box, that's the... like that?
Yeah.
correct.
That's a good good rule. So let's say
if you pay close attention, the input field was pre-populated with the name.
Yep.
So now you have dynamically updated information between the update input field and the name rendering. So it's, how you say, live happening.
Yep. So if I refresh again, because we initiate this here with Hazar Askari, that's why it goes into this box, and if I change it, it's going to change and update dynamically. So that's for the two-way binding. Let's create a new component, and the way we do that is ng generate. You can write generate, or you can just say G for generate, and you can write component, but C for component, and then you can write a path to generate this. And we want to first create component folder and then call our new component. What should we call it?
Man.
Person.
Working with developers here.
Let's see. Oh, ng generate component.
You're outside the project.
Oh, wow. What was the name of the project?
KDS demo.
Right. So ng generate component person. Thank you very much. And also, you can see that, okay, it created HTML, spec file, component.ts, and CSS, and then it says to you, it also updated the module, app module file. And that's something we can check out here. Yep, he automatically updated the modules file. So now this person component can be used anywhere in the app. So you can see here under the folder person, it created a new folder called person and then created all the corresponding files. And inside here, it just says person works. And then it created the base of a component for us also. And we can see here in the declaration of a component that it adds, it just tells us where the template URL is. So this is our index file. This is this one. And also it tells us this is where the styles URL are. And that's this one. If I don't need this, I can just remove that. And it will not crash or anything, and then I can just delete this one also if I want to. The important thing here is to note what the selector is, because the way we can call on this component from the outside or from another component is to use this selector. And let's see here in the index.html file. We can see that there's a selector here for approot. And this is not a known HTML tag. This is a custom tag. And this approot is the app selectors or the app components selector. So basically the index file is telling us to load app component, which is this one, and from here we can call on the new component that we just created by saying app person. So if I save now, we get the markup inside the HTML file of the, let's this. So person works. Person works. Save. We can go back. Hello world. So we have now created, or we have an app component which calls on a component that we created. Cool. But we need to, yep.
Yep. Here you go.
If you're working, collaborating like you two are and having trouble talking to each other, just wondering, how do you document your components? Does the CLI have any built-in documentation system, or is it like documenting your inputs and outputs and pre-requirements for the components and so on?
There is nothing.
There's nothing built in.
Nothing built in.
Yeah.
I'm going to talk through you and you talk to them. You have there's a third-party library called Compodoc, which automatically maps out your app and maps it for you, and it generates. It's like JavaDoc if you have a relationship to that. Similar way, it goes through the code and generates a documentation for you.
Okay.
You need, of course, to do the same, say, declarations and stuff like that. But yeah, you can auto-generate that when you work. Okay.
So, having just calling this app person component is nothing special. So let's move on and make it a little bit more exciting here. So in Angular, we have something called dependency injection. So, do you want to explain the dependency injection?
Yeah, sure. He's going to map out a way where you can, to a component, you can inject, let's say, a data service. It's very common to do. Or let's say you do a form builder. So you have this main app TS file that imports special components, and then you can inject it to the person. This is commonly used if you have a singleton, like a single instance of something, which normally you do.
We're gonna create a service now.
Yeah, perfect.
And return some data.
Yeah. So he will now declare a service in the CLI and then generate it and maybe call it data service or KDS service. So this will be the one responsible for holding all the data as long as the app lives. So it turns into like the backend kind of thing. So in the data service, it's also very common to set up the HTTP client where you do the GET requests and you provide the URLs there. You say, go get me this data, and my app will continue running, and then the data comes back asynchronous, and then it feeds it to the component, which then again renders it.
So let's do that now.
Yes, please.
So, in the same way that we created a component, we're going to say ng generate s for service. And we're gonna put it in the services folder and call it just app. Yeah. And it's going to add the service behind. So now it generated a service, but when we generate services, it doesn't automatically update our app module. So we have to go in here and into providers, add the service. And what is the name of the service? We can go into our folder and see that it's called app service. So if I go here and I paste it in here, my IDE is clever enough to know where it is. So yeah, I can just say import it, and it added the import up here. If I save it now, I can now access this service file from anywhere in my app. So if I go to my app component, I can inject that service into my constructor by saying public app service and say app service. And for those of you that are not familiar with this type of, this is TypeScript. So I am just saying that app service is of type app service. For all the backenders here, they will understand. Okay, so now I can go into my service and, yep.
You always want it public then?
No, you can have it private if you want. Yep.
You want the ball?
If it's public, you can reach it from the view.
I can show you that. Okay, so let's create, I'm thinking we can create a list of persons and then return that list of persons. But to use TypeScript here, we can define what a person is first in a model. So under here, I can create a new folder and call it models. And inside here, I can create a new file, call it person.ts. And here I can export class person. And I can say, okay, what does a person have? A person has a name.
Age.
Which will be of type string. And age, which is of type
number.
Number. And what else?
Married. True, false, Boolean.
Ready to get married, I think. Okay, so we now say that this model needs these things. I think you can say that it's optional if you add somewhere here a question mark like this, I think. Then the model, it won't scream at you if you don't provide married. We can test that later.
Question mark is Elvis operator. It works the same way as you do in other languages that you probably have a relationship to.
So here we can say persons is of type person. Sorry, it's an array of person and is equal to, and it's saying what is person? I can say a person is, no.
You missed your shot, man. You had the include there ready to go.
Yep. Import, where is it? Out, import
Person.
person, and then where we are, one time back,
From.
models, right?
You're missing the from.
Uh-huh. From. So, yeah, oops. So, I can see here that it's already, TypeScript is already kicking in and telling me that you need these things. So let's define John Doe, age. Does anybody know how old John Doe is?
It's a string. No, a number.
But let's do that as a string and see what TypeScript tells us. And then married. True. So basically what he's saying in the bottom line there is type string is not assignable to type number. And this is why we are so in love with TypeScript, because okay, sorry, it's a number. Or if I say here, yes, it's not going to let me save. It's going to scream at me and say that what's going on. So true. And if we just copy paste this, Jane Doe, probably. Oh. And also, we can define a method here which will return this list. So we can say get persons and just return this dot persons. So now in our app component here, we have already injected it, so it's ready to use. We can now in our view file, and there are many ways to do what I'm going to do now, but I'm going to show you one of the ways. Here, I can say, I can use a directive, a built-in directive called ng4, and basically what I'm saying is render this component and the for each. So it's going to render this component every time. So app service.get persons, and you can also get IntelliSense here, by the way. I just haven't updated my
Wasn't it persons?
Was it persons? Oh yeah. Get persons. And each one is a person. So if I save now, we are going to get hello world twice, right? Because we haven't actually passed the data from the service. We're just saying render this
Twice.
twice now because our array is 2 objects.
This is a standard for loop, so.
Yeah, basically. So the persons is just saying hello world. Maybe we can say person dot name here. Was it big N, small n? What was it?
Small.
Small n. It's going to crash because he doesn't know what a person is. He don't know what a person is. So we need to have a way to pass that data from the parent component, which is the one that's calling it, to the other component. And the way we do that is, how many people here are familiar with React? I just want to know. Okay, so you would do this via props in React. But here, we do it this way. So in the person component, I can declare something called @input and call it something, person. We're going to get a person of type person. It's going to, and then it needs to import this as well. So we just imported person in the top because we are saying that this is of type person, and we imported input. And we're telling it that we expect an input from the component that is calling us, and we want that input to be called person, and we expect it to be of type person. So here we can now say the property inside this component, which we called person, should be person. Or let's just call this x and pass in x to make it easier to understand which is which. So the variable that I'm targeting here is this one, and I'm saying that that should be x. So now when we say person.name, then we get John Doe, Jane Doe. So if we go back and look at this app again, let me just refresh. You can probably see that, okay, this is a to-do list, and each to-do is a to-do component, and it accepts or expects to get some stuff in. Okay, but how do we, for example, tell the mother component that something has happened? Like this, for example, okay, we clicked here, and then we changed something here, and then we clicked save. Because we don't want this logic to happen inside this person component. We want this person component to receive a set of data, display this data, and then we don't want it to actually do any logic. We don't want this component to call the service and say save stuff, because we want this to maybe be reusable somewhere else. So what we want this component to do is to tell the parent component that I have been clicked, and you can decide what to do with whatever happened. So in order to be able to communicate back to the parent component, we can set up something called output. Easy input output. And we want our output to be called person.
Clicked?
Person clicked.
Mm.
Person clicked. And this is a new event emitter, because we want to, what we are doing now is we are creating our custom event. In Angular, we have click event, we have change event, we have input events. So when you type something into a text box, this is an input event. And we have on blur, we have change, for example, in a select or a checkbox, you can look for change. So what we are doing now is we are creating a new event emitter. Basically, we are creating a new type of event, And we are saying, or we can say, we can wrap this in a div. Let's just render out the rest of the data. Person dot, what was it? Age. Person dot
Married.
married.
D, not S. Mary is married.
And here, like something.
Save.
What is this?
Selenium WebDriver.
My auto import was a bit off. It's supposed to be in Angular core. So if you go back here, we can say, okay, cool. Let's just add HR to each. So okay, cool. We want to have an alert or something when one of these are clicked, or actually let's add a button. And let's just use a custom event. Click. And we want to run a function or a method inside our TypeScript file, which we don't have yet, but we will create it. Person clicked. Like this. And so we need to create that method here and say person clicked. Of course, we could.
It's the same name.
Call the event clicked. I didn't want to do that because we have click. So the naming here is off. Our custom event is called clicked. And our method is called person clicked. We could, of course, add the logic here and say somebody got clicked. We could. Oh, our button doesn't have text. Click me. Now, if I click this, somebody got clicked. But again, we don't want, we want this to be, I think it's called a dummy component that just presents data and doesn't actually do any logic. So we don't want to alert here. We want to alert, we want our parent to handle the alert. So what we do is we say this dot clicked. And because it's an event emitter, we have something called emit. And inside here, we can emit something back to the parent. And we want to say that this dot person, we want to send back this dot person. So that we can say John Doe was clicked or Jane Doe was clicked.
Then it's enough to send the name.
True, but maybe we needed the data in the future or something like that.
Maybe he got divorced, so married's not true anymore.
Maybe. Okay.
He got clicked.
Okay, are you satisfied now?
Yes.
Okay.
Developer.
Okay, so in our app component where we pass in the data, this is the same place where we can tell it now that, okay, we also expect some data back. And remember here, the way we listen to an event is in just parentheses. No, wait, what is this?
Parentheses.
Parentheses. Yeah. Okay, so parentheses is calling for events, and what did we call it?
Person clicked. Oh, clicked, yeah, true.
And in the quotations here, we tell it which method to run when this happens. And we want it to run handle person clicked. And the way to pass in or grab the data that comes in, because we're sending the name of the person, is to say event. And we don't have this method yet, so let's go ahead and create that method here. And we know that we are expecting a name, and we can say that it's of type string. And for now, let's just console.log or alert the name. So let's just like that.
This is where documentation is good. So how on earth should I know that a name is coming?
Exactly. Yeah, how you know a name is coming?
Yeah, when I write this, I write brackets clicked,
Yeah.
expect an event.
Yep.
That's my declaration, and suddenly it's a name. So documentation is...
But this one you can name it whatever you want.
Yeah, I know, but
Yeah. But yeah, the way you know that
if
it...
I write this, and I tell you, I'm going to set out an event.
Yep.
And then you try to figure out...
Oh, you mean, I thought you meant Angular documentation. You meant like documentation
Yes.
between... Yeah, exactly.
Component documentation.
Yeah. Super important. Okay, so let's see what's happening here. We can click here, and it's saying somebody got clicked, John Doe. So now we have like a two-way communication between the mother and the child component by passing in data and then expecting something back. Looking back at this, you can see that on each to-do, I have I listen for click events, and when I click it, I tell the parent that something got clicked, and then the parent handles the
Reacts to it.
and just does the necessary logic. And the same with
Probably sends the clicked one down to the next component.
yeah, something like that.
Yeah, because the mother component renders out both lists, right? And it's separated on two states.
It gets one request from one component. This one got clicked.
Yeah.
It takes that and probably sends it to the next one.
Yep.
And that one.
Exactly.
Let's show you another custom directive. If you don't remember, directives are this is a custom. No, this is a built-in directive. Sorry, not custom. I'm going to show you something called ngIf. For example, here I can say ngIf only show me if person dot married. Person dot married. And person dot married I know is a boolean, so I can say this. And then I go back here, and it shows me.
Both are true, bro.
Oh,
So what you could do is you could use the ngIf.
divorce them.
Yeah. Oh, one knows it's divorced. Hasn't just told the other one yet.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Complicated, okay? It's complicated. Okay, so now we're only showing John Doe.
But you could also use the boolean to show separate texts. You can say if you're not married, it shows single as a normal p element, because you can wrap it as a logic, right? So you can toggle easily information depending on a state.
Let's do that.
Yeah.
So,
So instead of showing true false, you could show something else, like a nice message.
yep, for example. What should we say? I am...
Happily married?
No, wait. We can say person.married, question mark. If you are married, else say...
Sad?
Do I say marries? Sad.
I'm married, I'm sad.
Okay. good. We have created this was all that we needed to create. This is actually everything that you need to create that app. And I can also see that our time is up, but, or is it up?
Yeah, I think the workshop can go 50 more minutes.
Perfect. Okay, for those of you
stuck with us.
Those of you who wants to follow. But I'm thinking, instead of getting false data, let's get correct data. And for those of you who haven't used, yeah, why did I say false? I don't know, mock data. But for those of you who haven't played with JSON placeholder yet, it's a really cool service where you can post, you can, it's basically open API. You can post there, you can get there. I'm thinking we can just get this amount of post and display it by using Angular's HTTP module. So forget all this person stuff. And in our models, let's create a model for this type of data. What is this? Like an article or something? Title, body, user ID, and ID. Yep, I think this is...
So user ID could be person. You can tie it together.
Yeah, if we get that far. But let's just get the data first. And it's posts. Okay. So in our models, let's create a post.ts. Export class post. This could also be interface. So you could arv, what's that?
Inherit.
Inherit stuff. So each post has user ID, ID, title, body. User ID. No, sorry. What's it called? Yeah, user ID of type number. ID. Per title, string, body, which is a string. And we can create a new component called post component. So ng generate component, components folder, and our component should be called post. Okay, and in our let's just remove this person's loop and save, and say let's go inside our app service here and remove these persons, persons, and using dependency injection we can inject our HTTP module in here. So private HTTP, what's the new one? You have used
module.
it? Isn't it?
I believe it's called module. Maybe it's replaced client.
I think it's the new one is called client. But let's...
And that is also a sign of maturity, because the first HTTP client, where you had to explicitly say what is the response every time. If you never declared it, you got an any back, which is like a blob of data. You had to then identify it and then cast it into JSON or whatever. But the new HTTP module has a default scheme that goes to JSON. So now you have to tell the other way. If you don't want JSON, you cast it to something else.
Yep. And I think it's called client. But for now, let's just use the deprecated, if you want to call it that. It's not deprecated yet, but... okay. So now we have... Oh, I almost forgot. We need to import it here also.
One down. No, sorry.
No, it's here. Import module from Angular HTTP. So now we have a HTTP module ready for use in everywhere. We can just inject it and use it. So we're going to say get posts here. Let's define a variable called URL string, and then that, and say this dot HTTP dot. Are we sure that it's this one?
Use whatever you're familiar with, man.
No, but I don't get IntelliSense. That's why I'm saying it. No, it's not that one. Let me just check real quick. It's the way to learn how to use the documentation. It was planned. Okay, so HTTP, you can see HTTP module, boom.
It's working.
At Angular HTTP module at Angular. Why is it HTTP module? And in our module, interesting. Let's go again. Here.
This is the one. They've actually removed all the client and the module name. So they just call it HTTP.
No, that's the deprecate. I think it's HTTP set
Client?
client.
Yeah.
I think the
Yeah.
module is just containing the
Aha.
package for them.
Okay, so HTTP client.
Client module. Yay!
So these are signs of, like he said, the bads, relatively new. So still, this is not a breaking change, but it's kind of is, right?
It gets confusing.
Gets confusing sometimes. And then here, and then also here.
The path is wrong. You need common.
That. Still not getting, but is it called? Not module. Oh, the other one would have worked also. I just.
Selenium WebDriver.
Thank you, Visual Studio Code.
We're helpful.
Dot.
Hello, friend.
We're back. Okay. So this .http.get. Oh. And the get will tell us what it expects. Just a URL, and optional, you see that on the third line, it says headers, question mark, Elvis operator. That means it's optional if you want to pass it in or not. But this .url, we want to get this data, plus the one that we, what was it, posts? Yep. So what this service does is it returns this, okay? And if we use that in our app component, we can remove this now. And this is something else really important to go into. we now have to use something called ngOnInit, which is a life cycle. It's an Angular life cycle. Do you want to explain life cycles?
Yeah. For the React people, this is similar to did component mount and will mount and dismount and all of that kind of thing. These are similar life hooks where you have the ngOnInit, which is called after the constructor for a component is completed. This is like an initialization of the component, and then it goes on to having the ngOnChange. You have the do check. I'm not going to say them all out loud because they're on the screen. But all of these serve different types of functions for us, right? So let's say
for example.
Yeah, that's like cleaning up after yourself, right? That you terminate the component where you came from, so you don't bloat whatever heap you're working with. I've had the experience of working with after view content, after view init. And that's like after the view, I had to go later in the process in order to do some view manipulation because I had to have the data first, the view has to be there. So I can, how you say, all of this is different, different parts of the process in when a component is booting up or init itself.
Yep, and we're going to use ngOnInit. And the way we do that is saying ngOnInit here, and in our class declaration here, we can say implements on init. And it's complaining because we haven't imported this. So if we want several life cycles here, we can just say comma and keep continuing with importing or writing here that it implements that and just implement the method here. But okay, ngOnInit. We want to use this service and fetch the data, and for now just console log whatever answer we get from the server. So this dot app service dot get posts, which is our method inside there, and just say dot subscribe for yeah.
Could you explain why you choose to do it in the onInit instead of the constructor, or since you're not using any bounded data now?
I think it's just because I've heard all the time don't do a lot of logic in the constructor.
I think the main purpose with doing onInit is that then you're guaranteed that the bindings you receive are initialized. Yeah. So if you don't have any bindings, then there's
no point.
Only good practice doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you have a point, but I guess it's just because I don't want to have any logic inside the constructor.
My point is the core function for onInit is to give you a control hook.
Mm.
So if you depend on something, the
yeah.
onInit is where when you know you have it.
Yep.
Mm.
Otherwise, it's just a cool function.
Okay, moving on. Angular uses something, or the HTTP module uses RxJS. For those of you who are familiar with RxJS, it gives you streams or
HTTP streams.
Yep. So you can say here that you want to subscribe to whatever answer this gives us, our method. And you can use lambda expressions here to say, for example, results console.log result or res. Let's see what this gives us. If I move too fast with something, please let me know so that I can explain. But here is our response from the HTTP call that we did. It's an array of 100 items with each item inside it, which is this one. So every time I work with, for example, Alf or a backend developer, he creates an API for me, and I just do exactly what I did to fetch the data, and then I just pass that data to another component to show it and handle click events, and then post data back to the server to update something in the database, basically. We can now do many things, but we can, for example, here create a post list and say that it's of type array with post. Import post model and initialize it as an empty array. And when we get the result, let's do it like this. When we get the result, we can say this dot post list is equal to res. This is the new HTTP client. How do you here? You say
You can tell it to be a post. You can cast it.
like this, or
I do believe so.
no? So in our service, app service here, I can say of type
Post.
no, observable of type post.
Yeah. See, we're all good developers here. This is like mom programming.
But here now it's complaining.
User ID is missing in type object.
But how does it know?
Castet där ute i responsen. Resten är där ute i komponenten.
Yeah, but it's complaining here.
Det betyder säkert något där för den här castet.
But I shouldn't have to do this. I could here. I'm not used to working with the new HTTP client, that's why I am struggling a bit now. But let's close this. Close this. Here, you're saying
Res. Den översta resten är.
res.
Nej.
At the lambda expression.
Ta den in i parentes först.
Aha.
Hela resten in i parentes.
Res.
Res, kolon. Nej, in i där så känns det något.
Ah.
Och så säger du att den som kommer tillbaka är en array of person.
Post.
Post, så en array of person.
Aha.
Samma sak där uppe.
Okay.
You have to
Res.
define res. As Patrick says, res is there on any. So it's trying to decode it as an object.
Okay. I already like it. That's nice because the old one was any. Oh. Okay.
So default to any.
I see. So now you can actually define the results. Okay, that's perfect. So we're saying we're just populating this array with res, and we're saying that res is of type array with post. And let's just handle an error if it comes.
Like all good developers do.
Something happened. And
Straight into console. Problem dealt with.
let the user
Moving
handle it.
along.
Let the user handle it.
So relatable.
Yeah. all the users be like, nothing is working. You'd be like, see the console log.
Okay, cool. Let's now we have this this array. It's populated. We can now say app post and say post of the posts list. Was it posts or post list? Post list. Okay, cool. Get it. Post definitely works. And we can pass it in each post by using input, like we did earlier. So post component. Are you?
In components, you made two nice folders. Component and components.
It's okay. It's nice. But we expect to get a post of type post and input. Place and in post component, instead of saying post works, let's print out to post.title. Then we can pass in to post our post. Save, refresh, and we get each here. You can also use Elvis operator here to tell it to wait for the title to come in. Sometimes working with asynchronous calls can cause strange errors, and by saying post.title, you're assuming that you have it. By saying this, it can also take it when it comes in.
You can also use asynchronous pipe.
Yeah, you can here say async. Then it will only do this for when it has the list. Okay, so we have the data now. Post.body, was it? And we could continue to grab the user IDs and the IDs, the users from the user IDs, because this JSON thing here allows you to get the users. You could get the users and the posts and then combine them, show the users. But we're not going to do that. We have set up a Git repository, which is actually in my Git repository right now. But it's a public repository where I have set up the ToDo app. Where is it? I don't think it's here anymore. So you can see how this was built. It's very little code, very little code. And you can see how it's built, and you can take it down from here or clone it from here.
A side note is that we primarily use it to consume data. You don't normally make too much data, in the sense that he consumed posts. You could consume user's ID, and then you can aggregate and make a result and then show that to the user. You also have this case where, as he said, dummy components, because you have a nice selector called ng template, where you can have almost a no content within a component, and you can pass your own custom HTML all the way in. And you can actually do that between the app selectors or the component selectors that you define. So the flexibility is very high, and this is not the way and the only way to do it. So you might find other ways. I found ToDo apps where it's purely event emitters, and you have one model component that just listens to all of it and then updates dynamically based on what the children components do. We have some of that, but we like a different way. Also, when he did the temporary story of the post list, you could also consume that right away in the view. You don't have to like keep it in the component. So you can use the servers right there to render it out right away instead of temporary storing it, but then you lose it because you consume it right away, and if you navigate somewhere or do something else, then it's over.
App component is called app_service.getPosts.
Yeah, but you have to return the subscribe then, I think.
Huh?
I think you have to return the subscribe so that you're actually subscribing to the information that's coming.
From the service.
Yeah.
Yep.
What is currently not been shown is one like the routing, because we could import a route in the app component and then set up routes and then make a app.routes.ts file that would enable us to navigate to different pages within the component and then emulate this as a URL. But it's all client side. There's no actually navigation, so that's why you get the snappy feel and look. And also why we highlighted the CMS issues after, because you need some catchers to catch the apps when they navigate outside the scope.
Also, we didn't show the forms module,
yep,
which is a really powerful module, really easy way to set up forms and set up validation in a really, really easy way. So that's also something worth looking at. Yep,
absolutely. As you saw, if you go back to the app TS, now the app module place, you see that the flow is normally that you declare your own components, and when you do imports, you import from normally the node modules folder. So let's say when I showed you, for those who were here, I showed you the bank situation I had, and I had to upload something. I handed my project the third-party handling of ng2 file uploader made by Valor Software, which is very active in the Angular world. So, there's a lot of different types of modules and different types of animations that you can actually just drop in and start consuming. And all of them have directives and inputs and outputs that is ready and hopefully, as you say, documented, so you can just start using it the correct way.
I can show one cool thing. This is something called Angular material. So you can use with Angular. So you can get like a really, really nice look and feel to stuff. For example, form fields, radio buttons. You have sliders, and it's all very, very easy to use, very well documented. It tells you where to import it from, and it gives you examples and code how to use it.
And this is made by the Angular, like the Google material team. So they, of course, are very tightly coupled, and they predefine components that you can just use in the Angular tool. So think of it as building blocks. So you have these guys, and there's a couple of other major players in the NG world where you get
state handling and stuff like that.
Yeah, you get to use Redux for those React people who like feel the states handling and the stores are like, and the reducers in action. You can get it. You can get your fix, calm down. And you have, but it's very nice that a lot of people like push out a lot of components. So, and they are normally you can select just a few. In our ToDo app that is hosted on his repository has used components from here. That's why you get this quite easy flat design from 2017. I assume you did 0 to 5% of custom CSS here?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think like 10 lines of CSS.
Yeah.
The rest is that Angular components thing.
Do you have an example of the upload component, file upload, anything you can show?
Do you have it in the...
Maybe. I know I know even the Git repository. It's like ng2-file upload by Valor software. So if you need the package, that's where it is. But that is for ng2 and up. So exactly. But this is somebody else's work, so I'm not going to take credit. But I've used this to dynamically handle uploading, because it gives you like drag and drop, it gives you drag select, it gives you multiple selects. You have progress, you have delete, you have completed the full queue, you have queue handling. It's a very nice module related to upload. So I think that is it for the workshop.
Yeah, definitely.
And please ask us any questions if you have. I have a really nice orange box that helps everybody hear what you have to say. Don't everybody go at once.
Yep.
Yes, there we go. The eager guy up in front. Here you go.
Thank you. So you have you log in to console when it's error, so it's obviously ready for production. So how hard is it to go from here to production environment?
So let's say we are super satisfied with how our app looks at this state. ng or the Angular CLI. In the wiki, you can see that we have something called ng build here. And ng build will give us several flags. So we can say, give us this app right here optimized for prod. So if we go into our and we say ng build prod, it will generate a dist folder for us. Dist folder, and inside this dist folder you have basically 3 CSS files, sorry, JavaScript files, and the whole app lives inside there. So you have, it's ready to be used on somewhere. And let's just check out.
But where do you define prod and test and an environment you have?
We have environments. We have
okay, you have an environment file. Okay.
Environments, and we can here we can have different. We can just extend this to whatever we want, and define different things for prod and.
I think I understand. I've made a development config here, so I do a totally different set of URLs, for instance. So it asks my local machine, like my instance of the backend, and I've set up a pre-production version, and I've set up the production version URL scheme. So when I initiate the app, I check for which environment am I targeting in the build process. So when I'm initiating the build, or say the app is initiating itself, it reads the correct URLs and starts talking to the correct endpoints. And then you have cache busting with the hash in the file, so it's more or less a drop-in replacement. But quite commonly, people tend to generate also a Docker image of all of it and then restart the instance with the new Docker instance. So it's several ways to deal with it. Related to error logging, I've looked into I think it's called Sentry, which is like front-end handling, and that gives me the current state before, during, and after a crash. So the app kind of like defaults and sends this to something I'm going to set up though. So it's further down the line. And it's several ways to handle the logging.
And also just this small app that we built right now, I don't know actually which version of Angular are we using. Let me just check that first. 5.2. I don't know. Is that the latest? No, 5.
I have no idea.
5 or something I think is the latest. But just the initiation hello world is down to 180, I think. 180 kilobytes. But our came to 212. And I think if you use the closure compiler, it takes it down all the way to 30 or 40 kilobytes instead of using like Webpack and stuff like that.
Yes. You want the ball?
No. Should you try to build it with the AOT?
It's by default AOT.
Oh, yeah.
So when you say prod, you don't have to define AOT anymore. It's by default does it.
Maybe you could show the different environments in Angular Cli.
What do you mean?
The JSON file in your project Angular Cli JSON. There's the environments that you talked about. You have 2 default environments, and you implemented a second one, a third one. There you go. Environments. You see that you have
Dev, prod.
So then you would, if you want stage, for instance, then you can implement that way.
Quick question.
You want the ball?
Yep.
Just what is AOT?
So he's
Ahead of time compilation. So it's like pre-processing the whole application and doing optimizations on the code. It generally makes everything preloaded, so it runs faster. I haven't gone into depth what it means, but the JS just boots faster. If there's any questions and anything you're wondering after this this workshop, you can come see me and Hazar, and we'll have a nice discussion.
I think just to wrap it up and in conclusion, going home, installing the Angular CLI and just generating a new project and just toying around with it, create a new component, pass in some data, create a service will get you a long, long way to understanding how it all works.
So if there's no other questions, I would like to say thank you on behalf of me and Hazar. Thanks.